Chapter 1 The Beginning October 23rd. Missing! Noah scooped up the paper and read the word a second time. He walked the rest of his street with his eyes fixed on the grainy black and white photograph of his sister and the word that had haunted him for 3 weeks. Missing. Until recently, he had associated the word with minor misplaced things, like his keys or his baseball glove, but now it described his sister. On her way to a piano lesson 3 weeks earlier, Megan had stepped off the porch, walked down the street, and never been seen again. She'd simply disappeared. In the first days after her disappearance, she was all anyone could think about. Her picture was posted on every storefront window and telephone pole within 100 miles. County residents had united to search for her. They'd walked hand in hand across open fields, scoured deep woods, and walked door to door in distant communities, hoping someone had seen her. Their search spanned days, weeks. But after 3 weeks, there was still no sign of Megan. And though no one said the words, people clearly had given up. Determined to find his sister, Noah began his own search and called up his 2 best friends, Ella and Richie, to help him. For most of their lives, Ella, Richie, Megan, and Noah had been members of a club called the Action Scouts. Their club was like most others. They had a fort, a name, secret passwords, and private meetings. What made the Action Scouts special was that it was their club, based on their unique friendship. So powerful was the Scouts' friendship that they believed they were inseparable, and Noah, Ella, and Richie hoped this would bring Megan home. It didn't. Now, 3 weeks after Megan's disappearance, Noah found himself gazing at her picture as he walked across his backyard. Minutes ago, he'd found the flyer in the street. It had probably blown off of a telephone pole. "Meg, where are you?" he whispered. The wind snapped the edges of the flyer. Noah gave it a final look and stuffed it into his pocket. He stopped in front of the big oak tree in his backyard. Nailed to it was a weather-beaten sign with fading paint. He'd made it years ago with Megan, Ella, and Richie. The sign read, "You are now entering Fort Scout. Do not enter." It might as well have read, "Welcome. Now go away." He stared high into the tree. 20 feet above was Fort Scout, set in a tangle of tree limbs. It was the most elaborate tree fort he had ever seen. It had a roof, 2 doors, and 4 windows. It had 3 points of entry: a ladder, a rope, and a spiral staircase that circled the trunk and ended at a hole in the floor. Long rope bridges connected the fort to far-off trees. Noah climbed the stairs and stepped into the fort. His footsteps thumped on the wooden planks. The fort was filled with stuff: tables and chairs and games and jackets. A pile of equipment lay on one of the tables: tools, batteries, and strange electrical objects that looked like metal bugs. These belonged to Richie. A whiz with gadgets, he was always working on what he claimed was high-tech spy equipment. Noah stared out the window at the empty gray sky and heard nothing but the sound of the wind. He headed across one of the rope bridges toward a lookout platform. The bridge creaked and swayed. On the platform, he looked toward the Clarksville City Zoo. 2 elephants, a giraffe, and a tiger were in his view, sleeping in their compounds, but mostly the zoo looked empty and sad. Looking down on the zoo from the height of the platform made Noah think of the night Megan had insisted she spotted monkeys on the rooftops. He remembered standing beside her, scanning the darkness for a sign of anything unusual. He'd seen nothing. Certainly no runaway zoo animals. From that night until the day she disappeared, Megan had acted differently. She'd been distant and preoccupied, like a person with a secret. Sometimes Noah had weird thoughts. Sometimes he wondered if the zoo had something to do with her disappearance. Megan, after all, had claimed she'd spotted animals escaping. Maybe she had. Worse, maybe she wasn't supposed to. Perhaps she put herself in some kind of danger just by seeing them. Could the animals have come for her, kidnapped her because something bad was going on at the zoo? These were ridiculous ideas, and no one knew it. He was stressed, and the stress was making him think crazy things. Still, if these ideas were so crazy, why did they keep coming back? Noah looked away from the zoo. He wondered where Megan was, if she was okay, and whether she'd ever make it home. He bumped his toe on the short flagpole that lay on the platform. The flag was red with large white letters, A and S. He picked it up and held it in the air. "The Action Scouts' distress flag," he muttered. 2 years earlier, Richie's grandfather, an Army veteran, had given the kids the idea of making distress flags. He'd said that if the scouts became separated, they'd need a way to communicate trouble, and the distress flags had been his answer. He talked Richie's grandmother into making one for each of the children and one for Fort Scout. Noah lifted the pole into a spot in the tree. The flag waved, and the A and S rippled in the breeze. He looked across his yard and into the street. A part of him hoped Ella or Richie would see the flag and come running. If not Ella or Richie, then someone, anyone, who could help him get back his sister in his old life. Noah waited almost a half hour. No one came. Finally, the cold got the best of him. He climbed down from Fort Scout, entered the house, and went to bed early. As he lay beneath the covers, he imagined Megan, her warm smile, and her sisterly love. Eventually, he drifted to sleep. Shortly before midnight, he woke to a tap, tap, tap on his bedroom window. Chapter 2. A Cryptic Message. Tap, tap, tap. Noah sat up, glanced around the dimly lit room, and listened. Had he imagined it? Tap, tap, tap. The sound came again. He jumped out of bed. "Who's there?" he called. Tap, tap. The window answered. He crept across the floor, not knowing what he might find. Was a branch rapping his window? Could a loose shutter be rattling? Tap, tap, tap. He stood at the window and peered out. He saw nothing but the black starlit sky. No branch, no loose shutter, nothing. Tap, tap. He strained his eyes to see better, but all he saw was the night. Tap, 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 tap. He swung open the window. The cool air brushed his skin, and goosebumps rose along his arms. A bird had perched on the window ledge, barely the size of his thumb. It had shiny blue feathers and a bright red bill. As it looked at Noah, it tipped its head from side to side inquisitively. Relief washed over the boy from head to toe. "You scared me half to—" The bird sprang off the ledge, flew into his room, and circled near the ceiling. "Hey!" Noah shouted. "Get out of here!" The bird fluttered around for several seconds before it perched on a lampshade near the bed. It snapped its head back and forth, staring at Noah as if it expected something. "Out!" Noah ordered. "Get out!" Then, as suddenly as the bird had flown into the room, it lifted off the lampshade, dived through the window, and flew out, all in the blink of an eye. "Good!" Noah brushed his hands together, happy to be done with the bird. But as he walked toward the window to close it, the winged creature darted back in. "Get out, I said!" The bird continuously circled near the ceiling. Each time it veered overhead, Noah jumped up and tried to snag it out of the air. After his fifth or sixth jump, he noticed that the bird was clutching something in its tiny talons, a piece of paper. A moment later, the bird dropped the paper into the hollow of Noah's pillow, headed for the window, and perched on the sill. Puzzled, Noah stared at the bird. He watched its beady eyes dart from his face to the paper, reminding him of the way his grandmother would restlessly wait for someone to unwrap a present. Its expression said, "Well, this was given to you for a reason." The paper on his pillow was wrinkled and torn, and it looked as though it had spent a week in a puddle. He picked it up and flattened the creases to reveal a funny-looking monkey with bushy eyebrows, a tuft of hair growing on its chin, and a long tail. The heading above the photo read, "Come to the Clarksville City Zoo and see our new friend, Mr. Talltail." Noah had seen Mr. Talltail at the zoo many times. He certainly wasn't a new arrival. This was an old flyer. "What's going on?" Noah turned toward the bird. "What's—" The bird was gone. Noah looked back at the paper. Mr. Talltail stared at him with wide, worried eyes. Noah read it again. "Come to the Clarksville City Zoo and see our new friend, Mr. Talltail." This is nothing. It's trash that a bird picked up, Noah told himself. But he had read about birds acting as messengers and delivering notes to people. "Don't be dumb," Noah muttered. "We have email these days. Besides, this paper doesn't have a message. There's not a—" He peered at the heading. A few of the words had holes in them, tiny holes that looked as if someone had punched them out with the tip of a pencil, or maybe with the tip of a tiny beak. No way. He read out loud only the words with holes. "To the Clarksville City Zoo and our new friend." It made no sense. Wait a minute. He scanned the words without holes in them. "Come see Mr. Talltail." Was this a message? No, he mumbled, it can't be. He read the new sentence again without pausing between the words. Come see Mr. Talltail. The sentence was complete, structured, even instructional. Noah raised his eyes to the windows. The sill was empty. The wind blew gentle ripples through his ivory-colored drapes. He shivered. The drapes looked like ghosts.